I talked to a shepherd who'd come across the whale years before. He was walking his dog along the beach and he'd seen it while it was still alive. And it was him who'd buried it in the sand because it was going to stink. So he dug the sand underneath it, as it were, so it rolled into a pit and left it there. Pilot whales are like the orca. They're oceanic dolphins. They're still cetaceans, they're members of the whale family. And it's a relatively common whale in British waters, particularly around Scotland. My friend in Sheffield had told me exactly where the beach was and shown me on an OS map. From Pitlochry, we drove to Skye, and then we took the boat from Skye to Loch Maddie, which is on North Uist. And then we drove a couple of miles out of town and camped in the rain with eaten alive by mozzies. And then the next morning drove to the bottom of North Uist. There's a causeway onto Benbecula, a small island, and then another causeway onto South Uist. We parked up and walked over a headland to the beach, 40-minute walk maybe. We wild camped back from the beach because the smell was pretty pervasive. And as I dug out the bones, the deeper I got, the more putrid the remains were, and then I laid them out on the beach just so that I could see if I got everything. And I ended up realising that I was missing most of the left pectoral fin, and there were no teeth. The reason for getting it was really about satisfying my interest in these things. You know, I find them beautiful, and you always get something about the way that an animal has not only changed, but what is in common. The whales are really interesting because they evolved from an even-toed ungulate, hippos, deer, cows, pigs. The ancestors of those had a 5-fingered limb. An animal that lived on land. When it spent more and more time feeding in aquatic environments, it gradually reduced the number of digits. And it went through, there was a form called ambulocetus, the walking whale. And gradually there was a loss of the back legs completely. The story of evolution, it's there. It's not a theory. But as you march back through time, after many, many, many generations, you'd see that our ancestors looked less and less human-like. And even further back, you would see that other lineages joined ours, including that of the whale. What could be more special than being related to everything? I'd taken loads of refuse bags, and they were all bagged up, put in the car and driven back. Driving back to Sheffield with all the windows open because the car stank for about a month afterwards. What was interesting was when I got back to Sheffield, I realised that I couldn't leave this in the garden or anything because the neighbours would rightly complain. So my first thought was I'll bury it in the Peak District. And I needed to find somewhere close to the road, easy to dig, where people weren't going to disturb it. And that's not easy to find. So I ended up hiding all the 6 or 7 bags in the bracken off Sheep Hill Road and realised that still I couldn't find a spot. So eventually I gave up and dug a massive hole underneath my compost heap. So I left them then buried for 2 years, just for the decomposition to complete, waiting for the time to start on it. And lockdown provided that. You know, suddenly I'd got all this time. I was teaching at the college, and literally I just got an email saying, don't come in. When I was putting the whale skeleton together, I kept on having a reoccurring thought that this would look fabulous suspended over water. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, I've got to do this. I had the idea to hang it over the Don from Blanc Street Bridge, because Blanc Street Bridge has a beautiful arch. So I didn't tell anyone that I was going to do it, apart from asking friends to help, and just left it for people on the 5 Weirs walk to chance upon. And the reactions were fabulous. You know, people just said, wow, that's amazing. What's it there for? So whatever you think it's there for. But in the back of my mind, it did symbolise perhaps something along a resurrection. Here's a dead marine mammal now swimming through the air, or rather its remains. I wanted to do one with Sheffield, because Sheffield is my adopted home. I was born in Widnes. I wanted the city. So I did it from Meersbrook Park, from a tree, with the city in the background below. And it was a beautiful day. Yeah, again, no publicity beforehand, only people out walking the dogs, or people with young children. And yeah, it was something special. I wanted to do Stanage because I love the Peak District. It's kind of my spiritual home. I mean, that rock escarpment is God's own rock. And there's an obvious overhang to hang it off, flying buttress. It wasn't easy at all, but it looked fabulous. Again, there was nobody there. There was a couple of climbers came along and were amazed, one or two walkers. But it was a very quiet day. Those rocks were laid down about 350 million years ago. And when those rocks would have been formed, our ancestors would have been floating around above in the seas. Through time, we're all connected. So that point then, during the lifetime of Stanage, we shared an ancestor with this animal, and that was pretty fantastic. As one of my friends said afterwards, he said, I don't think I'll be doing that again. I really love Sheffield. There's something very special about the city and the people, and it was nice to be able to give something back, so that's why I offered it to the museum. Life passes through all things. It's been unbroken since the very first living thing. It's like a river flowing. It's in our bodies for a while, but now it's in your sons, and it will go on and on and on. There'll be little tributaries that will die out, you know, like the dinosaurs did. Well, there's a bit more of a giant river there, but that continuity is very, very real, and that is a spiritual thing, but it's also a science thing. And when you look at those peculiarities of the whale skeleton, and you can identify these common structures in the pentadactyl limb, the scapula, the humerus, the radius, the ulnus, the carpals and the phalanges, and it's a hand. That is something quite powerful.